I'm Iris Bell, 69, a widow, formerly a librarian. The day my daughter, Lila Reyes, gently said, "Mom, you should move into assisted living so we can stop worrying," I understood something sharp and simple. The elderly can be packed into cardboard boxes, stamped fragile, and slid into a corner of someone else's house. Her husband, Brent Reyes, spoke in contract language. Accounts, powers of attorney, will manage it for you. I watched my jewelry box get carried off and felt my heart close, not because I'd lost things, but because I'd been downgraded to an insured burden. I'm not asking for pity. I want one plain thing: to be called by my name, to keep my voice, and to build a decent roof for the grandchild who's on the way. I am still Lila's mother, the woman who stood through storms. I only lost the boundary between love and being used. And I promise, if there's any warmth left in these hands, I'll spend it on women our age made invisible, with paperwork, with truth, and with kindness that never bows its head. Then the reversal came, not by miracle, but by a small brass key. I opened the cabinet my husband left behind and found a codicil to the will. The building Lila lives in had been placed into a trust, and I'm the trustee. Turns out I wasn't standing outside my daughter's door. I own the house. In court the next morning, the judge hesitated when she saw me and said softly, as if afraid to drop the past, "That's her." Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, share this story, and don't forget to leave a comment wherever you're listening. Now come back with me to that morning in Cleveland. The courtroom door swung open. A pen clicked against the stone floor, and every gaze swung my way. I drew one slow breath, and that's where the story begins. I walked into the courthouse in Cleveland, Ohio. The smell of cold stone and stale coffee mixed like a morning that refuses to wake. The judge, flipping through a file, stopped short. He looked at me and said, slow and precise, "It's her." The room went so quiet you could hear the tiny tick of a pen hitting the floor. I squared my shoulders the way I used to at the library when I had to remind patrons about overdue books. My name is Iris Bell, 69, a widow. I volunteered with legal aid for years. These wooden benches are familiar because I've stood with the vulnerable, not because I belong at the defendant's table. Today, the people pulling me in here share my last name. My daughter, Lila Reyes, and her husband, Brent. They say I need a place with proper care. They say I'll be safer with the young managing everything. I smiled, the kind of smile a cardiologist would tell you not to practice. They say I need care. What they really want is the key to my safe deposit box. If old age teaches anything, it's that people rarely tell you what they want in the first sentence. Their lawyer read smoothly, words like decline, unstable, fall risk. Like an inventory list they're eager to shelve in storage. I swallowed and thought about hands steady enough to tie my shoes, a mind clear enough to remember my husband's tea. I didn't come empty-handed. In my bag, photos of the family jewelry box, a cream will envelope yellowing at the edges, a ledger thick with pen strokes, and stacks of emails printed from an old machine, each one a pebble in my palm to remind me the ground is still there. The clerk called my name. I answered as calmly as reading a catalog card. A whisper ran through the back rows. Not everyone is used to an old woman walking into court without hanging on her son-in-law's elbow. I looked at Lila. She avoided my eyes, one hand on her belly as if afraid of a draft. Maybe she thinks she did right listening to the crisp voice beside her rather than the rasp of a woman past 60. Brent sat rigid, striped tie straight as a steel ruler. Even his gaze was gridded, measuring, calculating. I once believed men only turn ugly when they're desperate. Now I know some do it because it's the fastest route. I drew a long breath. The cold back of the wooden bench touched my thin coat. Anyone who's lost a husband knows silence has shape. It sits in the chest like a stone you learn to carry and keep walking. The judge looked from the file to me. He blinked, as if checking his memory. The quiet in his eyes told me he knew me from somewhere else. Some winter, some corridor, those long legal aid shifts. I said nothing. Some threads should only show themselves when their hour comes. Their lawyer repeated the pitch. Move into care. Transfer management of the accounts to younger, sturdier relatives, all under a handsome label called love. To me, it looked like a backlit billboard. The brighter it glows, the harder it hides a patch of dark. I asked to speak briefly. I said I still drive, still cook, still remember my neighbor's name and bill due dates. I said I'm not against help. I'm against being boxed up. Then I looked Brent in the eye and asked if he remembered the change of address forms, if he remembered the jewelry box relabeled miscellaneous fragile. The room shifted like a boat changing course. Their lawyer hesitated. I set my expense ledger on the table, flipped to the lines that matched the days they called convenient. I laid the will envelope beside it, unopened, touching it lightly the way you rest a hand on an old friend's shoulder. Someone coughed. Someone checked a watch. I didn't hurry. Age teaches the art of moving slowly, so other people's hurry reveals itself. And beneath the soft scrape of paper, I heard my husband's voice from when he was alive. If you're back to the wall, find the small brass key behind the third drawer. I glanced at Lila. She bit her lip, eyes admitting there was something she didn't know. I wanted to hold her, but a hug now would be a summer downpour in the wrong season. Wet, not better. The judge set his pen down. He nodded. The way you soothe a wave. He called a recess. His voice was low, like an old room that's still sound. I stood. My hands didn't shake. In my head, the old drawers slid open tier by tier, like the library I used to tend. Every drawer had a label, every label a piece of the story someone tried to erase. I looked back at the gallery once more. Everything held still like a photograph. Then I set my hand on my purse and felt the edge of the will envelope press back, enough to remind me the invisible still casts a shadow. When the courtroom door closed behind me, I knew my voice had come back, and I was ready to start at the beginning. Why I'm here. Why a mother has to learn to become the landlord of her own child, and why it's her was enough to swing a hearing. A month before the hearing, my roast chicken dinner turned into a pitch meeting. The pitch had a name, put Mom in assisted living, with a lifetime package and a smile full of conditions. I'd marinated the bird since morning, thyme and lemon soaked into the skin, the smell looping the kitchen like a kind memory. Lila arrived on time with a bouquet of daisies. Brent followed, carrying a white cardboard box, the lid stickered convenience. We sat. I poured tea. The chicken steamed. Lila opened gently, as if afraid the stove heat might scald her voice. Mom, we found a place with 24-hour care. You'll have friends, activities, a doctor right there if you need one. Brent slid right in, smooth as a contract. We'll keep your accounts safe, just temporarily so you don't have to worry. I carved a piece of chicken onto Lila's plate. I said, sounds like a 6 a.m. radio ad. You're just missing terms and conditions apply to make it polite. Lila gave a thin smile. Brent pulled the box toward the china cabinet. He popped the lid, took out zip bags and gloves. Where's your jewelry box, Mom? I'll put it in a separate bin. Things that are easily misplaced should be consolidated. Saves trouble. I set my fork down. The family jewelry box sits in the low drawer where my hand can find it without looking. I spoke slowly, eyes on the wood grain of the table. I'm not dead. Have you finished offering condolences already? The air snapped like a thread. Lila grabbed my hand, hurried. We just want you to feel secure. We just want things tidy. Tidy is what people say when they're packing someone else's fear into a box. Brent cleared his throat. He opened the cabinet, slipped a few framed photos into bubble sleeves. I asked if he knew which one was my wedding day and which was the day my daughter was born. He studied them and said, they aren't labeled. That's when Ava Park knocked. She carried a tin of warm cookies, scarf striped around her neck. She smiled at me, eyes sweeping the cardboard, the zip bags, the half-open ring case. "Hi, Miss Iris. I'm next door and brought cookies." I nodded. "Come have chicken. They're doing big work here." Ava sat beside me and listened to Lila describe the new place. She didn't comment. She asked one small question I won't forget. "Miss Iris, if you move, where will your mail be forwarded?" I looked at Brent. He answered quickly. "To our house, for convenience." Ava set another cookie on my plate. She said, playful without a smile, "Convenience is a wide word. You can fit a whole person inside it and they won't notice." Dinner went on, but the chicken now tasted faintly of paperwork. Lila described the daily schedule: seniors yoga, a reading room with big windows. I asked if any window looked out onto your own life. Lila kept her eyes down and whispered that maybe she'd decided too fast. Brent kept bagging the small things, fresh printed labels smelling of ink. He talked about security and procedure. His voice was a conveyor belt, gliding past every snag under the word reasonable. I stood to pour more tea. The kettle ticked like old bones in a weather change. My hand was steady. "If you love me, you must also love what I value," I said. "Don't call them easily misplaced. They find their way home better than many people do." Lila cried. Tears fell straight to the edge of the tablecloth. "I'm afraid one day you'll fall and no one will know. I'm afraid I'll open the door and find the kitchen cold." I touched her cheek. "Fear is right, but fear isn't a power of attorney. Fear is for learning to stand steadier, not for letting someone else stand in your place." Brent tightened his grip on the tote. He checked his watch. "Do you agree? So we can file next week?" he asked. I said no. I need to reread my life one more time. Ava cleared plates. "Need a hand with anything?" she asked, light as setting a small stone in a climber's pocket. I shook my head. "Leave it. Pack tomorrow. The belongings of the living shouldn't be rushed." Early month wind slid through the door frame. The curtain brushed the sill. I felt the house taking my pulse. Slow, steady. All these years, it has witnessed every family negotiation, including the ones without a table. Brent's tone snapped. "If you resist, we'll ask the court to declare you incompetent. It's faster, less arguing." The sentence fell like a rock into a dry well. I smiled, the kind that makes your cheekbones ache. My hands trembled, not from fear, but because my body knows when a boundary's been touched. I wiped my hands, pulled the jewelry box closer, and shut the lid with a soft click. "Thank you for dinner," I said. "I've heard what I needed. Starting tomorrow, we'll speak on paper." "Mom," Lila called, but I was already up, in my room, opening the second drawer where I keep the expense ledger and the letters I never sent. I heard Brent lower his voice in the living room. Appointments, signatures, certifications. That night I lay on my side and listened to the house breathe. I knew someone would knock early with papers and rounded explanations. I also knew that somewhere in a locked drawer, my past was waiting for a very small key. And the next morning I decided to find it. That morning they showed up right on time, like a delivery window. A box truck stopped at the curb, and the storage crew hauled in cartons taller than half a person. On each lid they slapped a thick marker label, "Mom, fragile." My hallway turned into a paper graveyard. I took out my notebook and clipped a pen to the spine. I signed the temporary receipt so they'd relax, then quietly logged what mattered. Who called, who came in, who touched what, how long it took, the exact words they used. I used to be a librarian. Remembering is habit and armor. The crew lead asked if I had an inventory. I handed him my printed list and drew a line under each item as the matching box crossed the threshold. Blue ceramic jar, silver frame, white hand-stitched quilt. Each thing leaving its place felt like a joint popping from its socket. Brent arrived mid-morning. White shirt, spotless shoes. He shook the crew lead's hand, opened his laptop, and spoke in process. "Mom, Sign this so we can forward your mail to our house. For convenience. I looked at the screen, a forwarding form with their address already filled in. Convenience is a wide word, I said, wide enough to swallow a name. Brent smiled. Just a small thing. I snapped a photo of the screen, saved it to a new album titled Address. Lila came late, face sleep-starved. She handed me a water bottle, asked if I'd eaten. She trailed the movers into my bedroom and opened the low drawer where the heirloom jewelry box sits. Easily misplaced items should be consolidated first, she murmured. I heard the phrase easily misplaced hit the floor and break into a gritty sound. I followed, set my hand on the lid, cool as a sick person's forehead. Leave it, I said. I'll sort it tonight. Lila looked at me, eyes dark with worry and fatigue. She lowered her voice. Mom, why can't you be a little easier? The sentence touched a soft place I'd hidden well. I tasted the metallic tang of hurt. I didn't answer right away. I opened the small drawer and pulled out my expense ledger. Groceries, utilities, every line of my pen steady as a resting heartbeat. I added today's notes. Box 7, wedding portrait. Box 9, white quilt. Jewelry box, not moved. In the living room, the storage crew offered to barcode the boxes for easy finding next time. I nodded, but in my head I used my own labels. The kitchen, where Arthur brewed tea. The window, where Lila first sounded out words. The oak cabinet, where I keep what won't go into speech. Brent made a call. Voice dropped. I caught scraps. Appointments, signatures, witnesses. He came back with another form. Just sign so your mail won't get lost. I picked up the pen and stopped at the italic line. I thought about letters with my name on them sent to me, even when they're just bills. They're still me. I set the pen down. Leave it. I'll read it later. And I took another photo. Ava stopped by with a bag of fruit. She paused on the threshold, taking in the line of boxes stamped Mom, fragile. Want help numbering? She asked. Thanks, I said. I'm on it. Then half to myself. Everything gets a number. Only hearts change. By afternoon, the house had shrunk. The rip of packing tape sounded like the cinch on a dress that's a size too small. Lila stood in the doorway, eyes hollow. I told her to sit, eat some fruit. She sat, but kept her phone in hand, messages blinking. Brent had sent her a photo of the mail forwarding packet with a 2-word caption. For convenience. I smiled. Sometimes the only thing that keeps me upright is just enough sarcasm to warm the throat. Convenience is the word the strong use to shove the hard parts onto the weak, I said. Lila lowered her head and squeezed the bottle until it dented. At sunset, the crew said their goodbyes. They handed me the invoice and the duplicate receipt for my files. I slid them into my purse, held close like a wallet. The house went quiet. The smell of tape and cardboard lingered, stubborn as a song nobody requested. I locked the door. The kitchen found its voice again, the fridge breathing soft, the clock ticking light. I brewed tea, sat at the table, opened my notebook, and wrote one plain line. They've started packing me up. I'll be the one to unpack. That night, I stood before the old oak cabinet, the one with the long locked compartment. I felt along the edge for the tiny nail Arthur set as a signal. He told me only open it if you're back to the wall. My chest slowed, waiting for the right knock. I opened the sewing tin, lifted the worn fabric, and took out a small brass key. It was so light, I feared I'd drop it with a deep breath. I wrapped my fingers in a scrap of cloth so sweat wouldn't slip it. The long, dry lock gave a small sound, like someone exhaling. I turned the key and heard the neat click. The panel eased forward. Inside, thick darkness and the smell of old wood. In the middle, a sliver of envelope caught the lamp, thin but stiff, like an answer waiting its turn. I set 2 fingers on it and drew it out, and I understood. Starting tomorrow, nothing was going to be convenient for anyone. The small brass key sat neatly in my palm. I slid it into the lock and heard the softest click. Inside was a cream envelope, the edge browned with years. The first line, in a round, steady hand. Iris, if you're reading this. I pulled up a chair and set the envelope under the lamp. The paper smelled of old pages and oak, like a winter afternoon at the library. If you're reading this, it means you're facing a hard door. I signed a codicil 6 months before I passed. The equity in the Maple Street building goes into the Bell Family Trust. You are the trustee. Don't let anyone else define the word safety for you. I touched my chest, just for a moment. Then I slid the letter aside and drew out the packet clipped behind it. The papers were crisp, neatly stapled. A tab labeled with the trust's name. I photographed every page on my phone and saved them in a new folder called Maple. A librarian's habits have never betrayed me. I opened my laptop and logged into the bank. Numbers can be mossy stones. Your foot slips if you don't plant it right. I filtered for the dates Brent called helping manage. A few transfers popped up. Nothing loud enough to trigger alarms, just enough to look convenient. I cross-checked my ledger and penciled marks beside every line that didn't match. Statements don't lie, they just wait for someone who knows how to listen. Next, the building management portal. I found Arthur's old account and reset the password with the email we once shared for book notices. Up came the unit list with the owner, Bell Family Trust. I scrolled to Lila and Brent's apartment. The line was cool and clear. The asset belongs to the trust. The manager is Iris Bell. I leaned back, the chair giving a small nod of wood. In the screen's reflection, my face looked steady in a way that surprised me. I wasn't useless, just invisible to their ambition. It wasn't sweet to realize. It was dry as a printed page, easier to keep. I pulled another stack from the cabinet, storage receipts, box photos, item lists. I numbered and dated them, tucking in screenshots of Brent's mail forwarding forms. Everything slotted into place like a freshly shelved stack. I called Ava Park. She picked up on the first ring, breath still edged with night air. I laid out what I'd found. Do you remember the process for a temporary protective order and a financial complaint? A quiet twang hummed in the line, like a string tuned to pitch. You read, I'll do the bullet points, she said. We split the work like two people on a bridge, passing bricks back and forth. I backed everything up to a USB, emailed scans from a fresh account with its own password. Ava drafted the to-dos. Timestamp everything. Preserve evidence. Flag questionable transactions with the bank. Set a meeting with building management for a written ownership confirmation. Prepare the court filings. I printed a 30-day notice per housing law. No heavy language, just a courteous notice from the trust manager to the current occupants. I filled in names, address, dates. My handwriting was as steady as the day I wrote my first catalog card. When the ink dried, I folded the paper in thirds and slid it into an envelope. I wrote, Lila and Brent, in a gentle slant, careful not to press any letter darker than the next. I sealed it with a thin strip of glue, smoothing from center to edge. That flat, finished feel reminded me of what Arthur's used to say. Justice doesn't need to be loud. It just needs not to shake. Back at the table, I checked everything one more time. The codicil, the photos, the bank statements with matching dates, the printed HOA records, the inventory, the storage receipts, the mail forwarding screenshots. Nothing extra, nothing missing. I put it all into a gray canvas tote, the same bag I used when I volunteered at the library for legal aid. A circle closing under old footsteps. Outside, wind swept the front walk. I put on my coat, took the envelope, and walked the hallway. Every step passed a carton labeled fragile, reminding me they'd tried to box me up. I set a hand on each, as if greeting old friends, then pushed out to the yard. Their mailbox sat under a yellow porch light. I lifted the lid and slid the envelope in. No music, no spotlight, just the clean click of the lid shutting. My hands didn't shake anymore. I stood up straight and took in the neighborhood's night. dry leaves and gasoline braided together. Somewhere a car rolled past, headlights skimming the curb and going dark. I went back inside, turned off the kitchen light, checked the deadbolt. The tote in my bag had its own quiet weight. Tomorrow, I'll go to the bank, the management office, and court with Ava. Tonight I'll make tea and let a new truth lie down. On the other side of this wall, they'll have that letter soon, and they'll learn a word they've used on me often, but rarely on themselves: boundary. The day the storage truck came back, I stood at their apartment door with a mug of hot tea. The steam rose like a small flag, signaling I was calm. The elevator bell dinged. The movers saw me and nodded. They knew my face now. Brent opened the door. White shirt, dark tie, a smile thin as carbon paper. Lila stood behind him, one hand resting lightly on her belly. I set the mug on the threshold and looked him straight in the eye. I spoke without raising my voice or circling the point. This unit is in a building I manage. You have 30 days. That's the law. And the last of my grace. The air dropped a notch. Brent let out a short laugh like someone closing a file. He asked what I was basing it on. I lifted my canvas tote and pulled out the management's written verification and the trust abstract. 3 pages, just heavy enough to make a hand let go. Lila glanced at me, eyes red from lack of sleep. She was about to say something when Brent lifted a hand to stop her, then hoisted the pregnancy like a shield. He spoke slowly, as if tutoring me in manners. Lila is pregnant. Do you want to throw a pregnant woman out on the street? I heard the question dissolve in the hallway. I answered before it hardened into guilt. A child needs a roof made of respect, not of tactics. If there's any grace left, it goes to the baby first, then the baby's mother. As for the rest, if you push yourself outside, you can learn to stand on your own. Color rose in Brent's face. He took a step toward me. I didn't step back. I added one more line, like setting a block in front of a rolling wheel. I'm not throwing Lila out from her mother. I'm setting a condition. Brent leaves this apartment. Lila can come to my home until the court decides. 30 days is enough time for everyone to choose their next step. He started to argue. I lifted a hand, polite, as an invitation to sit, and I added the thing I'd saved for the right moment. This morning I filed a complaint with your company's HR, including statements that line up with the dates you call helping manage. I choose process, not pull. I choose light, not shadows. Lila burst into tears. First rain quiet, but soaking. She said I'm sorry, but her apology snagged on Brent's anger. He pointed at me, words hard as stone. You'll regret this. I smiled, a smile old, not tired. If justice equals regret, I'll regret forever. A draft slid through the corridor, carrying in the smell of tape and fresh-cut cardboard. The movers waited, uncertain. I turned to them and said one clear sentence. Please help Brent pack his personal items. Lila's things stay. She's leaving with me. Brent turned his back, pulled shirts, shoes, the watch box from drawers, and threw them into a suitcase like tossing bricks in a dry well. Lila's hand shook at her wedding band, then stilled. I set my hand on her shoulder. You don't have to decide everything this afternoon. Just decide you won't be silent. When the suitcase snapped shut, the apartment felt strangely larger. I took the 30-day notice from my bag and held it out to Brent. He didn't take it. I set it on the table next to a vase of fake flowers. Lila looked at the paper the way you look at a road. Not pretty, but passable. I texted Ava to confirm delivery. She replied with a short checklist. Keep receipts. Photograph the belongings. Don't get dragged into long arguments. I followed it like reciting the alphabet. Simple things save people. The afternoon thinned. Hall lights clicked to yellow. I walked Lila home. Our steps sounded like 2 breaths out of sync, and then aligned. At my door, I handed her the old key ring. You stay here. I'll take the small room. Tomorrow we go to the bank. then the building office. All you have to do now is sleep. Night fell. I sat at the kitchen table. The morning tea was cold, but the mint still clung to the air. I opened my laptop and checked my inbox. HR had auto-replied. Complaint received. A dry line of text, but enough to tell me I was on the right road. I switched off the light, leaving the screen's pale blue glow. The phone buzzed softly. A text from an unknown number. I opened it. A summons. Emergency hearing. Date and time in bright red, like a flare. Under it, Ava sent one more short line, setting a stone exactly where it belongs. One more thing. The judge knows you. The night before the hearing, Lila knocked on my door. She was holding her old snow globe. She gave it a small shake, and the white flakes fell as slowly as hesitant snow. I opened up. Night air slipped in, cold but clarifying. We sat at the kitchen table. The kettle whispered, like a shy bird not ready to sing. Lila set the snow globe in the middle of the table. The lamp lit her face, young and worn at once. "I'm scared of being broke," she said first. "I'm scared of opening the cupboard and finding nothing, of bills stamped in red. Brent told me smart women let men hold the keys." I believed him. I looked at her. Fear is real. But fear isn't a passport that lets someone cross your boundaries. She kept going, voice low. "Brent managed me by calendar, by passwords, by gentle reminders that his mother needed money. He said if I didn't go along, people would think I was ungrateful. He's good at making me feel guilty even before I do anything." I poured tea. The mint lifted our throats like a warm hand. "Have you tried changing your passwords?" I asked. Lila gave a crooked smile. "I did, but he can read my eyes. He sat next to me while I typed, said it was to help." She pulled a small stack of papers from her bag. "Here's the mail forwarding form," she whispered. "Brent forced me to sign, and this is a temporary power of attorney. He said it was just to make paying things easier. I let him turn my mother invisible." She folded her forehead onto the back of her hand. The tears fell straight. I slid my chair closer but didn't hug her. A hug right now would only cool her courage. I spoke slowly, giving each word a place to stand. "You can stay here, but tomorrow you have to stand up with me in court. If you don't, you'll sink again." Lila lifted her face. "I'm scared stiff, but I'll talk." My phone buzzed. Ava texted. She was at the gate. I opened the door, and she came in with a file bag and a felt-tip pen. Her eyes scanned the kitchen the way a watchmaker looks for where to set tools. "Let's build a timeline, see," Ava said, soft but sharp. "No fuss." She spread paper across the table and set down yellow, blue, and pink sticky notes. Each color was a pin. Internal emails, the building management sheet, bank statements that matched the dates, mail forwarding forms, photos of the MOM, fragile boxes. I handed her the USB. Ava plugged it in, opened each file, and relabeled them. She reordered everything the way you shelve books. Evidence doesn't need to shout. It just needs to line up. Eyes closed, Lila walked through the dates. The day Brent moved my appointments. The day he said the jewelry box had to go because it was easily misplaced. The day he pressed her to sign. I ticked a pencil mark for each point. The graphite made a dry, sure sound. Ava tapped a few contacts so the court and building office numbers sat at the top of her call list. "Be there 15 minutes early," she said. "No arguing in the hallway. No personal stories unless asked. Start every answer with yes or no. Save your strength for the last 2 sentences. That's where the truth goes in." Lila turned the snow globe. More flakes. She looked at me. "If I stumble, don't rescue me. Let me stand." I nodded. Only the ones who stand on their own learn their legs have bones. Night thinned. Ava packed the files into a hard folder and tied the string. I put away the kettle and turned off the stove. I listened to the house breathe. Some homes know how to comfort you with their silence. Lila asked to sleep in the small room. I gave her a soft cotton shirt that still smelled of sun. She cradled the snow globe. The door clicked shut. The latch sounded like a nod. I sat alone at the table looking at the file folder, boxy, just heavy enough to keep my hands from shaking. I cracked the window and took a long breath. Somewhere a truck rumbled by, steady as a gentle beast. On the table, 2 ballpoints, a stamp, a small stack of paper. The props an old woman carries when she has to step onto life's stage. Before bed, I texted Ava. Remind me to bring the expense ledger. She answered at once. Already in the gray tote. I smiled. Some younger people make me believe age isn't a fence. I woke before the alarm. I made coffee and set out 2 slices of toast for Lila. She came out with pillow crease on her cheek. I handed her a warm mug of milk. Drink. No matter what you say today, you're carrying a life. We left as the sun pulled an orange curtain across the rooftops. The first wind of morning cleared our eyes. I carried the file. Lila carried the snow globe. 2 different weights, same purpose, reminders not to get lost. The courthouse sat at the end of the block, gray stone frontage. I paused to fix Lila's scarf. Ava was waiting on the steps, waving. We walked through the revolving door. The wind split clean in 2. And then I saw him. Brent stood a few paces from the entrance, phone to his ear. He didn't look our way. His voice stretched tight down the hall. Plan B, he said. Starting now. I stepped in. Judge Daniel Morales looked at me and froze like he'd just run into an old winter. He tipped his head. Ms. Bell, legal aid, 1998? I nodded, and for a sliver of a second, the tick of a clock hand, the room held its breath. Morales cleared his throat. Plain and direct, he said that because he knew me professionally, he would recuse himself to avoid even a shadow of doubt. The gavel tapped lightly. The case slid next door to the assigned judge, Rachel Stein. A door opened, quick footsteps. Justice kept moving, by the book. Judge Stein sat, her eyes skimming the case file like a seamstress checking a stitch. She asked both sides to speak only to what could be verified. Ava laid our hard folder on the table and opened it like a well-lined drawer. Internal emails, the HOA sheet, date-matched statements, the mail forwarding forms, photos of the mom, fragile boxes, each item a clean beat, quiet, sharp. Brent's lawyer started in with concerns, convenience, best interests. It sounded like a grocery store ad on repeat. Judge Stein lifted a hand. Evidence, please. Ava put up the steady transfers on the very days Brent called helping manage. I ran a pencil down my expense ledger and ticked the mismatches. Building management submitted a statement. The apartment Lila and Brent occupy belongs to the Bell Family Trust, with me as trustee. The downstairs neighbor took the stand and described hearing arguments, lines like, Mom doesn't get a say, and we'll hold it, it's easier. A printed text, straight as a steel rule. Forward mail to new address this week. Brent's color shifted. He asked to speak, voice hardening as he held Lila's pregnancy up like a shield. She's expecting. Judge Stein looked straight at him. Precisely why this court requires a safe environment, transparent finances, and no coercion. Lila asked to stand. One hand rested lightly on her belly, like on a small circle of light. I choose my mother, she said, steady. And I choose our baby over quiet violence. The room tilted like a boat catching the right wind. Judge Stein wrote, then read a temporary order, words measured like a carpenter's tape. 1. A temporary protective order for me. No contact, no texts, no proxy check-ins. 2. A 90-day suspension of Brent's direct contact with me or Lila. Any modification requires completion of anger management and an independent financial assessment. 3. A warning on coercion and baseless threats of a competency filing. All related materials to be referred to the Elder Financial Abuse Unit. Brent's lawyer tried to add a note about good intentions. Judge Stein looked up, voice thin and keen. Good intentions are not a license to cut across boundaries. It landed like a hammer, finally finding a stubborn nail. She turned to me. Miss Bell, anything further? I stood straight, the way I used to when reminding someone to return an overdue book. I want to speak about boundaries, I said. They save the lives of older people better than any panic button. With boundaries, you know whom to call, what to keep, and where to stop. Judge Stein nodded. Enough, she signed. The ink dried fast. No shouting, no table pounding, just papers landing where they belonged. Ava squeezed my hand. We stepped into the hallway. Noon light fell on the stone floor, cold, exact. Brent leaned against the wall, his gaze no longer gridded to the millimeter. As I passed, he tossed a low line like a pebble into a hedge. You won't win. Forever. I didn't stop. Sometimes the best answer is forward. Lila matched my pace. Mom, she said. I thought I would fall. Turns out I can stand. I smiled. Standing is lesson 1. Moving is lesson 2. On the steps, Ava handed me a short handwritten list. Save the temporary orders, alert the bank to flag the accounts, work with building management to lock access, book therapy for Lila. Each tidy line. Justice isn't magic. It's housework done steadily. We split at the door. I went home, brewed a pot of tea, set the case folder by the window. A sparrow landed on the sill and cocked its head. My phone buzzed. An anonymous email slid into my inbox. Subject bare as bone. For your eyes only. I opened it. Just one line, thin as a blade tucked in an envelope. Brent is a pawn. Ask who actually amended Arthur's will. Below it, a tiny attachment, the file name short as a wink. I stared at the screen and listened to the house breathe. And I understood. This board still had pieces we hadn't seen. In the morning, I turned the soil behind the house and planted a row of violets. Lila helped me water, one hand gently cradling her belly. She smiled and said the smell was just like when Dad was still alive. I bent to set each plug in place, listening to the soil break softly like a lock clicking open. Old hands still remember how to warm a young root. Some things grow more from patience than from sun. Inside, I set a tin box on the kitchen table. I taped a label on the lid. Violet Fund. Small, but real. A fund for older women whose own families have stripped them. A financial agency. To cover consult fees, to print documents, to call a cab and get to court on time. That night I opened my ledger and wrote the first lines. A little from my grocery savings. A little from a former library patron who mailed a gift. Not much, but enough so one person doesn't have to stand alone. I felt that old sensation from years ago, handing out a first library book to someone who didn't read many words yet. Lila stayed with me. She split her accounts, cut off the authorized user card. Every expense got one neat line. I taught her how to read a bank statement by date, how to call a bank in a calm voice. She said she should have learned this sooner. I told her the important thing is learning when you need it. We were getting ready to welcome baby Luna. The name came to me one afternoon listening to the wind chime. Lila said she wanted the child to know the moonlight before the noise. I hung a paper mobile over the crib, one moon and a few stars cut from white stock. A week later, the Association of Retired Judges invited me to speak. They asked me to talk about boundaries and evidence the way you talk to your own mother. At the bottom was a note in Daniel Morales' hand. He just wrote, "Congratulations, and take care." Nothing more. I smiled and set the card on the shelf beside the toy wooden gavel Arthur once gave me as a joke. That evening after dinner, I reopened the anonymous email. The subject, "For your eyes only," sat there like a stone. I clicked the attachment. Up came a draft of a will. Uneven type with insertions and deletions. At the signature block, the pen stroke didn't match Arthur's real signature. I know because I've looked at that signature more than most people look in a mirror. I scrolled to the notations. The advisor line appeared, leaning a bit right, like someone standing off-center. The name there was Brent's mother. Not an attorney, not a licensed advisor, just a name. But it opened a door I hadn't expected. I leaned back and counted breaths. All along I'd thought Brent was just a rash man with a few cheap tricks. Now I understood someone set the board before he even knew the rules, and they placed me where my seams would show. I didn't call anyone yet. I did what a librarian knows how to do. I cross-checked. I opened the maple folder, pulled up the genuine codicil, and compared line by line. I marked the clumsy edits, the dates that didn't line up, an asset entry jammed in and then erased. I took screenshots and saved them to a new folder. I named it Violet, to remind myself to see everything in a steady light. Lila came out of her room with a warm glass of milk. She asked what I was looking at. I pointed to the screen and spoke slowly. See, that signature isn't your father's. And you recognize the name in the advisor field. Lila sat down, her fingers pressing the table's edge. Not fear, more than that. A kind of waking. I stitched together tomorrow's tasks, send copies to a secure mailbox, call a legal clinic about signature forgery, book a meeting with the trust administrator, and keep everything quiet until we had more light. Before bed, I went to the garden. The violet bed was still cool from watering. I sat on the wooden step and listened to insects tuning their little instruments in the grass. Some sounds only appear when you stay long enough. By morning, there were 3 letters in my mailbox. 1, another invitation from the Judges Association with a set date. 1, the electric bill, on time like a calm heartbeat. 1, an unmarked envelope with a small handwritten slip inside. Don't believe what he says. Look at who's behind him. I set the slip beside our faded wedding photo. Lila came in with the watering can. The smell of wet earth drifted into the kitchen like a blessing. I told her, we're okay now, and I believed it enough to breathe deep that day. But in my head I drafted a list of questions for the next chapter. Who altered the will? Why? Since when? I knew I would keep asking until the answers stood upright. Some seeds only open when you're not afraid of the dark. And then, as I was about to send a letter for the Violet Fund, my phone buzzed. A strange address popped up, a place I'd never been. At the end of the text was a single line, "Meet me there, and I'll show you where Arthur's real signature went." If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.